Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Chilly morning, but not as chilly as the other day, right? A little warmer in here now?
Yeah.
We have area heaters, thank goodness. All right. Well, today's message is falling into our theme of Centers for Spiritual Living, which of course is the 2017 theme of values-based living. And I'd like to welcome our Facebook friends who have come to join us on Facebook Live. We welcome you today, and we welcome your support. So if you want to go to our website at cslboston.org and make a donation, we would love your support in this ministry. So we continue on with this month's theme, which is education and continuous improvement, which is one of the Center for Spiritual Living's values, shared values of the community. And my talk today is webs and boxes. So you might ask, webs and boxes, what is that all about, right? Well, webs and boxes. Let's talk about, first of all, the science of mind point of view. The science of mind point of view is that truth or authenticity or the divine is always moving to express at the highest level, right? That's what we believe, right? That it's always trying to come up through, even in situations that appear out of alignment with that, right? Situations that are uncomfortable or whatever they are, there's always that divine energy trying to rise to the top, you know, to come forth into this experience. So that's one of our beliefs as religious scientists. We see this in nature and in the spiritual world, right? We see it in all of life. And the more we become aware of it, have you noticed the more you become aware of it, the more you see it, right? Isn't that awesome? Yeah. That our consciousness is so easily drawn or shifted to that place that we desire when we start to really open up to this teaching. So we are called to be this truth or divine in our human life. And that's the challenge, right? The challenge is being human and divine, of which we are. There's no separation from that. So I want to just share this quote that is from The Hidden Power, which is by Judge Thomas Troward. And he says, "We have never been out of our right path. Only we have been walking it backwards instead of forwards." Doesn't that feel right? And now that we have begun to follow the path in the right direction, we find that it is none other than the way of peace, the path of joy, and the road of eternal life. So when we start to get this, right, we start to move forward on that path. It makes such a difference in our lives. He goes on to say that these things we may attain by simply living naturally with ourselves. It is because we are trying to be or to do something which is not natural to us that we experience weariness and labor. So when we are in that place of being out of alignment, he's saying right here that that's when we get into that place of weariness or feeling labored in our life. It's so awesome how he says that. Where we should find all our activities joyously concentrated by the force of the love that we have for them. Isn't that an awesome thought? It's an awesome reality. But when we make the grand discovery of how to live naturally, we shall find it to be all, and more than all, a perpetual joy to ourselves, and we shall radiate light and life wherever we go. Isn't that wonderful? I had never heard that quote by him, and I really love that quote when I found that quote. I just thought that's so powerful. That's one of his later books. Because, you know, most of us who've studied roots, we've read some of, you know, the Edinburgh Lectures, and that's sort of very direct and firm, but he got much softer as he got older, and his older works are really quite powerful. So what I want to talk to you about today, just to see what we're talking about, is Telling the truth. Okay? So telling the truth. Shame, and how shame is affecting us in our lives. And cultivating authenticity. Ready to do that with me today?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's start with telling the truth. Tell the truth. All right. So when we talk about telling the truth, I'm talking about stepping out of our ideas of this old ideas of right and wrong, right? Because we know that the divine is always perfect. And so what I want to start with is a quote from Brené Brown. This is from The Gift of Imperfection. I love the name of that book. Owning our story and loving ourselves through that process is the bravest thing that we will ever do. Agree?
Yeah.
Right? That's big. That's powerful. And I just found that, and I loved that slide when I found that online. And I just thought it so speaks to this. It so speaks to who we are as an organization. So what we're talking about here is owning our story. Really owning our story. Knowing that our story is important. The story of myself, the story of yourself. It's an important story. Each of us has gone through what we've gone through to bring forth our story in a way that many times touches other people's lives. Have you ever felt yourself talking to somebody and you just felt called to say something about your past that you just felt was needed in that moment? And doesn't it feel good when someone says, oh, I so needed to hear that? Right? So it's being in that alignment. So that's why it's so important to tell our truth. Because our truth is a powerful thing. Our story is a continuing saga of reconciling our humanity and our divinity. Would you agree with that? Because our story is always that. And it never changes. It's continuous. It keeps going. And that's the beauty of it. And it doesn't even end when we vibrate out of this reality. That story continues. It continues in the people who have known us. It continues in so many different ways that we can't even imagine. It's powerful. It's a powerful thing. So this idea of living in and reconciling our humanity and our divinity, there are challenges to this. There's always the challenge, right? And the challenge is what makes us grow. So, has anybody here ever had an issue with the scripted fables? I'll just give them to you. You'll recognize these when you see them. Good boys and good girls, or good girls and good boys behave this way, right? How many bad kids do we have here?
Big feeling.
Good. That's the way it should be. I call forth that. Oh, how about this one? Illness is weakness, right? And we hear that here sometimes. And when we do, we change that and we shift that. And we just say, yes, you're experiencing illness, but that's not the truth behind that. Crisis of faith is unacceptable. There should be a full knowing and limitless stream of good. Otherwise, my life sucks, right? And how many of us heard that here? You know? And so it's important that we realize that, yeah, we may hear that, but that's when it's our turn to help someone else to be corrected to the realization that this is my experience, this is my path, this is my journey, and whatever I'm going through is perfect, is always perfect. Here's a great one. Success means money, title, and achievement, right? How many of us have felt successful when it didn't bring money, title, or achievement? I have, right? Because it's powerful. It's more than just those things, those labels that we put on. Again, the scripted fables, right? The stories that we don't want to hear. To appear well-behaved means controlling certain feelings, stuffing our feelings, you know. I'm well-behaved, so I am stuffing my feelings, right? Well, we don't stuff our feelings here. We feel our feelings because we can't do that. Because what happens when we stuff our feelings? It means that they can't come forward. It means that we can't move on. They become a block that we keep bouncing off of, right? And so when we get into all of this, where do we end up? Shame, right? Isn't that a great picture I found?
Yeah.
I've been there. Anybody else been there? Right? So, shame is a powerful force. It really is. It really causes a lot of issue. So has anybody here ever been mired in shame at some point in your life? Yeah. And why? Why have you been mired in shame? Because of maybe what someone said, or what you were taught, or what you were expected to believe, or what you thought someone thought, right? So those are all powerful things. And shame is absolutely powerless when we can move on. Now it's interesting because in her book, Brene Brown says that there's some differences here. So to women, shame is a web of competing and conflicting expectations. Would the women in the room agree with me?
Absolutely.
Right? So she's really hit the nail on the head here,
Yeah.
right? And it's a web. It's like this web, right? Men, on the other hand, shame is a box. We do not want to appear weak, and we want to avoid criticism and ridicule. And that's so true. So what happens with men so many times? We stuff our feelings, right? And I did for years, and I don't anymore. There are still times I catch myself and I say, I've got to get this out. But it's powerful. It's powerful. So, what happens with this shame is that it's talking about believing in the outer, right? Because shame is on the outer. It's what other people expect of you. It's the outer world and your expectation within that world. And it's not remembering our inherent wholeness, who we are as whole and complete individuals. Because that's the important thing we have to realize, and that's what we teach here, is that we are always whole. We are always whole, and there's always the opportunity for growth to our more full wholeness. So, it's also a lack of compassion for ourselves. Isn't it so easy to beat ourselves up? Isn't it easy to take ourselves down? It's so easy. I can raise someone else up, and I can so quickly take myself down. We need to stop that. Because that's all a part of that shame game. And we don't need that shame game anymore. It doesn't work. Now, I thought this was interesting because I had never really looked at it like this, but there's a difference between guilt and shame. It's a powerful difference. If it's guilt, I did something bad, right? Get this. If it's shame, I am bad. Wow. The I am, which we know is the powerful recognition of the divinity of who we are. So, is it possible that I am bad or you are bad? No, it's not possible. So we're going to let go of that. We're going to free ourselves of that, because that just does not work. So, shame has three universal truths. The first truth is that we all share our own story of shame. Would that be true? We each carry around our own stories of shame. We are taught to be afraid to talk about it. Don't talk about that with anybody. Don't bring that up. Don't talk about that, right? What will the neighbors think? Oh, my mother, bless her heart. Always, what will the neighbors think? You know, and I used to say to her, I don't care. And she gets so upset. And here's the powerful one. The less we discuss it, the more shame we have. Right? Yeah. So let's talk about it. Let's get it out, because it doesn't serve us to keep it inside. So moving on to the next level, let's cultivate authenticity. Keep it real. Keep it real. I think it's important that we do that. Now, sometimes here in the early beginnings of our teaching, we get the message that it's like, oh no, we just deny what we don't want and we just accept the good that we want, right? And that's confusing in the beginning, but it's the basics. It's getting into the understanding of these. This philosophy is very broad and dense. And when we get to that point of realizing that it's more than just that, what we're doing when we're doing that is we're creating a mental equivalent of what we desire to experience, which is one of our core concepts here, is the mental equivalent. So it's important that we realize we don't commit spiritual bypass, because spiritual bypass is not going through or dealing with any of the old shame or the old beliefs that may be holding us down or limiting us, or in our subconscious. Even though we're working on, this is what I want in my conscious life. I want this beauty, perfection, wholeness, and completeness. But there's that old shame story that's still floating around in there. And that's why we do our spiritual work. That's why we use our spiritual toolbox to bring forward anything that needs to be known. That's what we so often can find envisioning, what needs to be released, right? The big question, envisioning what needs to be released. The things that no longer serve. And the stuff will come up. And once we get that stuff, then we can just completely let it go. We can free ourselves of it. So we have to be willing to tell the truth, right? If we want to cultivate authenticity, and it's so beautiful. Your reading today was so perfect about being yourself, right? Because that's all about cultivating our authenticity. So we have to be willing to tell the truth. I need to be willing to tell my story, whatever my story is, because someone needs to hear it. And it's not the story of sadness, it becomes the story of victory when I can stand in my story, when I can believe in my story and say that my story is true and good and beautiful, and look where it's brought me. Because it's that ongoing story. It doesn't just stop with the old story, it moves forward into my growth, into my higher self. We need to choose authenticity as an unwavering value. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes.
Be willing to be who we are, to show up as the divine perfection that we are. And that means in all of our human messiness, because that's what it's about. It's the divine experiencing itself through each and every one of us. So it's got to be able to do that. And if we keep trying to sit in that pious place, guess what? We're not serving divinity. We're not serving the divine of who we are. So it's important that we do that. We need to avoid the spiritual bypass, as I said before, because that's going to limit us. That's going to limit how we can experience the fullness of life. And this is something that I thought was interesting, that, you know, in many of the 12-step programs, we go through that one step where we go through our personal inventory and make amends. I think there's a power in that. I think there's a very big power in that. Now, does it always mean I can go to that person and ask forgiveness or make amends? Not necessarily. And sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's about me doing my forgiveness work for me. And recognizing that that individual, whatever I believe they did to me, is not of importance. It's about me forgiving myself. And them becomes the secondary. But as I do that, I free myself. Because what happens when I'm in unforgiveness? Where's my power? I've given it to the other person, have I not? I've given them the power over my life. So that's why forgiveness is so important, and that's why I think that this is a really great step. I think it's a really important step. And we have to remember that one of our core concepts is forgiveness here in Centers for Spiritual Living. So it's a very important part of it all. So as we look at all of this, we look at all of these ideas, we recognize that we all have our story. And what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to share my story. This is my story of coming out. I know some of us have got that story. My story was most interesting, though. I was about 20-something, maybe 21, I don't remember. And I was living in the big city of, what was it, Alhambra, which is outside of Pasadena, near LA area. And, living by myself and really cool and really getting to know myself. And I came out of the closet to myself and a few people I knew, but I hadn't come out at home. So I would go home on the weekends, and on this one particular weekend, I had one of my gay magazines under the seat of the car. And as I drove up into the driveway and stopped, I didn't realize the magazine had slid out onto the mat in the car. So, my mother's helping me to unpack, and she says, "Is there anything I need to know?" And I said, "Why?" Well, she had found my magazine. But it was so powerful that when that happened, it was almost like I outed myself in a way, But there was a part of me that wanted to, I think, because it happened like that. And it was the most beautiful thing because there was such a freedom in that, because I had freed myself of something that I didn't want to hold a shame over. I didn't want to be ashamed of who I was. And it was very powerful because my mother came from a very born-again kind of consciousness. So it was hard for her in the beginning to recognize that, it's okay for me to be gay. But I remember she said to me, she says, "It doesn't matter that you're gay because you're my son and I will always love you." And that's powerful. So sometimes we tell our story recognizing that maybe there's something someone needs to tell us. Maybe there's something we need to hear. Because in the years that my mother and I have gone through this whole journey of me being gay and all of that, before she made her transition, she said to me, she said, "I know my God blessed me with a gay son because you were there for me and you took care of me." So we just never know when that story needs to be told, when that reality needs to be known. So, in conclusion, what I'd just like to say is to remind us to tell the truth, to do the work to release shame, to take the steps to live a life of authenticity. All those steps. Because if I own my story, does it mean that I've reached the final chapter of my life? Does it mean I've come to the end? No. About the middle, right? Somewhere around there. Or the beginning. I'll take the beginning. I don't mind starting over. I don't know if I want to go through my 20s again, but... So, are the women in the room ready to disengage from the web?
Yeah.
Are the men in the room ready to climb out of their boxes?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, yes. All right, well, good. So join me in beginning to tell the story of wholeness, love, and belonging. Because that's what we're about here. So please join with me in the affirmation. All that I am and all that I will ever be is an expression of God. Therefore, I am enough and my life matters. How does that feel?
Feels good.
Namaste.
Namaste.
And so if you'll join with me in the prayer. Just closing your eyes and relaxing into the chair. Feeling the support. Knowing that that is the support of the divine, that is the power of the infinite, that is the universal intelligence that resides at the center of each one. Recognizing and realizing that this infinite one power that I call the Mother, Father, God, Goddess, presence, intelligence, light, love, quantum energy field, all of these things All of these things are the truth of that one infinite universal source that is all love, all peace, all belonging, all creativity, all abundance, all overflowing prosperity, all peace that passes all understanding. It is the allness and the wholeness and the completeness. It is the creative source and substance of everything. And I recognize right here and right now that I am blessed in this recognition of this divine power. Recognizing that it is all that I am, and that I am all that it is. And as I recognize that it is all that there is within myself, I know that that is the truth of each one in this room, and I know that that is the truth of all throughout the cosmos, but there is no separation from this source. There's only the image or the idea of that. But that is not the truth. The truth is that there is only the one infinite universal mind that is expressing itself in and as and through each and every one. And so in gratitude and joy and peace, I recognize right here and right now that from this place of oneness, that I can call forth the truth for each and every one here. I can call forth the truth of telling our stories, knowing that those stories are empowering. And in that empowerment, that shame is completely obliterated and released and surrendered into the nothing from which it came. And the truth of authenticity is revealed. I declare that and I claim that for each one here, knowing that in that authenticity there is an abundance of overflowing good that will fill each life to overflowing. And that overflow pours out into the world and expresses itself as the love of the divine through and as and in all. So I gratefully claim all these gifts, knowing that it is always the Mother, Father, God's good pleasure to give the kingdom right here and right now, and I claim and declare this kingdom for all. Knowing that it is right and it is good right here and right now. I surrender and I release and I let this word flow from my mouth into the sacred soil of the law as seeds of truth that are received in that nurturing energy of the law, that sacred soil, where they come to full and complete manifestation through that loving presence that says yes, mechanically working for the highest good of all. I claim this and even more, and know that it is good and very, very good. And I say, blessed be, amen, ashe. And join with me in saying, and so it is.
Thank you, Rev G.